At my college graduation, I walked across that stage with a smile plastered on my face, diploma in hand, thinking this was finally my moment. 4 years of sleepless nights, endless studying, graduating summa cum laude from State University. I spotted my family in the crowd and waved. Then I heard my mother's voice cut through the applause like a knife. Well, I guess even my biggest disappointment can manage to graduate. That's when I pulled out my phone and read my Harvard Law acceptance letter out loud. 3 weeks later, my sister Kimberly would be calling me in tears, begging me to take back what I'd posted online. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. But let me start from the beginning, because this moment didn't happen in a vacuum. This was 22 years in the making. I should have known what kind of day it was going to be when my mother showed up to my graduation wearing the same dress she'd worn to Kimberly's wedding 2 years earlier. Not just any dress, the stunning emerald green one that cost more than my entire semester's textbooks. She'd driven 6 hours to get to my graduation, but apparently couldn't be bothered to buy something new for the occasion. When I hugged her and commented on how beautiful she looked, she just shrugged and said, "Well, it's not like this is as important as Kimberly's wedding." That should have been my first warning sign, but I was determined to make the day special. I'd worked so hard for this moment. 4 years of maintaining a perfect GPA while working two part-time jobs to pay for school. 4 years of choosing textbooks over meals, studying in the library until they kicked me out, writing papers until my eyes burned. I'd graduated at the top of my class in political science, earned the Dean's Award for Academic Excellence, and had already been accepted to 3 law schools. But none of that mattered to my family because I wasn't Kimberly. Growing up, I learned early that there were 2 types of children in the Rodriguez household. There was Kimberly, the golden child who could do no wrong, and then there was me, Maya, the one who had to work twice as hard for half the recognition. Kimberly was 3 years older, naturally charismatic, and had a talent for making everything look effortless. When she brought home a C+ in calculus, my parents celebrated with dinner at her favorite restaurant because math is so hard for creative minds like Kimberly. When I brought home straight A's, I got a pat on the head and a reminder that grades aren't everything, Maya. You need to develop some personality. When Kimberly decided she wanted to be a fashion designer, my parents immediately started researching the best art schools in the country. They visited campuses with her, helped her build a portfolio, and my father even converted the garage into a design studio. When I told them I wanted to be a lawyer, my mother laughed and said, "That's nice, dear, but maybe you should consider something more realistic. Law school's very competitive." The message was clear. Kimberly got dreams funded and supported. I got practical advice and budget constraints. During high school, the pattern only got worse. Kimberly struggled with her grades, so my parents hired her private tutors, got her into expensive test prep courses, and even had her tested for learning disabilities to see if she qualified for extra time on exams. Meanwhile, I was teaching myself advanced placement subjects because our school didn't offer enough challenging courses. And when I asked about getting additional academic support, I was told to figure it out because I was naturally smart. The worst part wasn't even the obvious favoritism. It was the way they made me feel guilty for wanting more. When I expressed frustration about the unequal treatment, my mother would sit me down for one of her talks. "Maya, sweetie, you have to understand that Kimberly needs more support. She's not as naturally gifted as you are. You've always been independent and capable. We're so proud of how self-sufficient you are." They made my self-reliance sound like a gift, when really it was just survival. The financial disparity was staggering. Kimberly's art school tuition was $40,000 a year, plus living expenses, supplies, and study abroad programs. My parents took out a second mortgage to pay for it. When I applied to colleges, I was told that in-state schools were more practical and that I should look into scholarships if I wanted to go anywhere expensive. I applied to 17 scholarship programs and worked 30 hours a week throughout high school to save money for college. I remember the night I got into my dream school, Northwestern University. I was so excited that I ran into the living room with the acceptance letter, practically vibrating with joy. My parents were watching television with Kimberly, who was home from art school for spring break. I announced my acceptance, expecting celebration, maybe even tears of pride. Instead, my father muted the TV, looked at the letter, and said, "That's great, honey. What kind of financial aid are they offering?" When I told him it wasn't a full scholarship, he handed the letter back and said, "Well, State University has a perfectly good program. No point in going into debt when you have a practical option." That same week, Kimberly announced she wanted to spend a semester in Paris studying fashion history. My parents immediately started researching programs and figuring out how to make it happen financially. She got her semester abroad. I got a lecture about fiscal responsibility. College was supposed to be my fresh start, my chance to prove myself in an environment where merit mattered more than family dynamics. I threw myself into my studies with an intensity that probably wasn't healthy. I joined the debate team, volunteered for political campaigns, tutored other students, and maintained a job throughout all 4 years. I wasn't just succeeding, I was excelling, beyond what anyone expected. But every achievement felt hollow because the people whose approval I craved most barely acknowledged them. When I made Dean's List every semester, I'd call home excited to share the news. My mother's response was always some variation of, "That's wonderful, dear. Did I tell you that Kimberly just got commissioned to design costumes for a local theater production?" When I won the university's most prestigious academic award in my junior year, complete with a cash prize and recognition at a formal ceremony, my parents couldn't attend because it conflicted with Kimberly's art show opening. The law school applications were my secret project. I spent months researching programs, crafting personal statements, and preparing for the LSAT. I scored in the 98th percentile, which qualified me for merit scholarships at several top-tier schools. I applied to Harvard, Yale, Stanford, and Columbia, along with several backup options. I didn't tell my family about any of it because I knew they'd find ways to diminish it or turn it into something about Kimberly. When the acceptance letters started arriving, I hid them in my apartment. Even my roommate didn't know the full extent of what was happening. I'd gotten into every school I'd applied to, with significant scholarship offers from most of them. Harvard offered me a partial scholarship that would cover 60% of tuition, plus work-study opportunities that could help with living expenses. It wasn't a full ride, but it was Harvard Law School, the dream I'd been working toward since I was 15 years old. I wanted to tell my family. I wanted them to be proud, to finally see that all my hard work had led to something extraordinary. But I also knew that sharing good news with them had always resulted in disappointment. They had a talent for finding the cloud in every silver lining when it came to my achievements. So I decided to wait until graduation. I thought that maybe, surrounded by all the other families celebrating their children's accomplishments, my parents might finally recognize what I'd achieved. Maybe seeing me walk across that stage, hearing my name called with highest honors, would make them realize that their practical daughter had actually done something remarkable. I should have known better. The graduation ceremony itself was beautiful, the weather was perfect, the campus looked stunning, and I felt genuinely proud as I walked across that stage. When they announced my name along with my academic honors, I could hear some of my classmates cheering. I waved to my family in the crowd, and for a moment, I thought I saw pride in my father's face. After the ceremony, families gathered for photos and celebration. I found my parents and Kimberly near the student center, and I was beaming as I approached them with my diploma. "So," I said, "what did you think? Pretty amazing, right?" I was fishing for compliments, but I felt like I'd earned the right to some praise. My father smiled and said, "Very nice, Maya. We're proud of you." It was a standard response, polite but not particularly enthusiastic. Then my mother, in her emerald green dress, looked me up and down and delivered the line that would change everything between us forever. "Well, I guess even my biggest disappointment can manage to graduate." She said it like she was commenting on the weather, casual, matter of fact, like it was just an obvious truth that everyone already knew. The words hit me like a physical blow, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. Around us, other families were hugging and crying happy tears and taking photos, and my mother had just called me her biggest disappointment on what should have been one of the proudest days of my life. Kimberly looked uncomfortable and mumbled something about needing to find a restroom. My father pretended he hadn't heard anything and started asking about where we should go for lunch. But I stood there, diploma in hand, processing what had just happened. That's when I made the decision that would change everything. I pulled out my phone, opened my camera app, and started recording. I held my phone steady and looked directly into the camera, my voice clear and controlled despite the storm brewing inside me. Hey everyone, I'm here at my college graduation, and I just want to share something special with you. My mother just called me her biggest disappointment, so I thought this might be the perfect time to read you something I've been keeping to myself. I reached into my purse and pulled out the letter I'd been carrying around for 3 months, the one with the crimson Harvard seal that I'd memorized every word of. My hands weren't shaking anymore, they were steady, determined. Dear Maya Rodriguez, I began, my voice growing stronger with each word. Congratulations. The admissions committee has voted to offer you admission to Harvard Law School's Juris Doctor program. We were particularly impressed by your academic excellence, leadership potential, and commitment to public service. I paused, looked up at my mother's shocked face, then continued. Furthermore, we are pleased to offer you the Dean's Merit Scholarship, covering 60% of your tuition based on your exceptional LSAT score and undergraduate achievements. The small crowd that had gathered around us fell silent. I could see other families stopping their conversations to listen. My father's mouth had fallen open, and Kimberly had emerged from wherever she'd disappeared to, her eyes wide with disbelief. But I wasn't finished. The letter goes on to say that they're particularly excited about my research proposal on immigration law reform and my plans to establish a nonprofit legal clinic serving undocumented families. I folded the letter carefully and looked back at the camera. So yeah, apparently your biggest disappointment just got into Harvard Law School with a substantial scholarship. Funny how that works out. I ended the recording and immediately posted it to every social media platform I had. The caption was simple. When your family's biggest disappointment gets into Harvard Law, sometimes the best revenge is success. My mother grabbed my arm, her voice a harsh whisper. Maya, what have you done? Delete that right now. People will think we're horrible parents. Maybe because you are, I said, pulling my arm away. 22 years of making me feel like nothing I do matters, and you're worried about what strangers on the internet think? You're being dramatic, my father said, but his voice lacked conviction. Your mother didn't mean it that way. Then how did she mean it, Dad? Because it sounded pretty clear to me. I turned to face both of them directly. I graduated summa cum laude. I got into Harvard Law School. I'm 22 years old, and I've never asked you for money, never gotten arrested, never caused you a moment of real trouble. And somehow I'm still the disappointment? Kimberly finally spoke up, her voice smaller than usual. Maya, maybe you could just take down the video. People might not understand the context. What context would make this okay? I asked her. Seriously, Kimberly, I want to know. What context makes it acceptable for a mother to call her daughter a disappointment on her graduation day? She didn't have an answer, because there wasn't one. My phone started buzzing almost immediately. Comments, likes, shares, messages from friends and classmates who'd seen the video. The notifications kept coming so fast I couldn't keep up with them. Within an hour, the video had been shared hundreds of times. By that evening, it had gone viral. The comments were overwhelmingly supportive. Your parents should be ashamed of themselves. Congratulations on Harvard, you deserve so much better. My heart breaks for you, but you're going to do amazing things. Some people shared their own stories of family disappointment and conditional love. Others offered words of encouragement and pride that my own family had never given me. But not everyone was on my side. I started getting messages from extended family members, people I barely knew, telling me I'd gone too far. My Aunt Patricia, who I hadn't spoken to in 5 years, sent me a long text about family loyalty and airing dirty laundry in public. My cousin Miguel called me disrespectful and said I was destroying the family reputation for internet clout. The most painful messages came from people who knew my family personally. Former neighbors, family friends, people from my parents' church. They painted my mother as a devoted parent who'd sacrificed so much for her children, and me as an ungrateful daughter who'd twisted her words for attention. They didn't know about the years of being overlooked, the constant comparison to Kimberly, the way my achievements were consistently minimized. They just saw a young woman publicly humiliating her mother and decided I was the villain. My parents stopped speaking to me entirely, not just about the video, but about everything. When I called the house, they wouldn't answer. When I showed up at their door 3 days later to try to have a conversation, my father told me through the closed door that they needed space to process what I'd done to the family. Kimberly was caught in the middle, which was a new experience for her. She'd never had to choose sides before because she'd always been the favored one. Now she was fielding calls from relatives asking her to talk sense into me, while also seeing the thousands of supportive comments on my video that made it clear the internet thought I was in the right. A week after graduation, she showed up at my apartment unannounced.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
I'd been packing for my move to Boston, surrounded by boxes and law school preparation materials. She looked around at my organized, purposeful chaos and seemed to realize for the first time that I was actually leaving, actually starting this new life that didn't include them. "Mom's really hurt," she said without preamble. "She's been crying for days." "I'm hurt too," I replied, continuing to pack books. "The difference is, I've been hurt for 22 years, and nobody seemed to care." "That's not fair. They love you." I stopped packing and looked at her directly. "Name one time in the last 5 years when they celebrated my success without immediately changing the subject to you." She opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again. I watched her mentally scroll through family dinners, phone calls, visits home, looking for evidence that I was wrong. She couldn't find any. "They're just different with me," she said finally, but her voice was uncertain. "Yes, they are, and now you know what it feels like to be on the other side of that difference." I taped up a box with more force than necessary. "Do you know that I got into every law school I applied to? Every single one. Yale, Stanford, Columbia, full scholarships to some of them. And I didn't tell them about any of it because I knew they'd find a way to make it about you or dismiss it as not that important." Kimberly sat down heavily on my couch. "I didn't know you applied to other schools." "There's a lot you don't know because this family operates on a need-to-know basis, and apparently I never need to know that I matter." I moved to another box, this one filled with legal textbooks I'd been collecting since high school. "I spent 4 years working multiple jobs to pay for school while you got a free ride. I got perfect grades while you struggled to maintain a C average. I won academic awards while you got participation trophies. And somehow, at the end of all of that, I'm still the disappointment." "Maya, you know Mom doesn't really think that." "Then why did she say it? And why did she say it in public, at my graduation, in front of other families who were actually proud of their children?" I could feel the anger rising again, the same fury that had driven me to make that video. "And why are you here defending her instead of demanding that she apologize to me?" She didn't have an answer for that either. The video continued to gain traction. Local news stations picked it up. A blogger wrote an article about it called "The Hidden Damage of Conditional Love." Someone created a hashtag. My story had become bigger than just my family's dysfunction. It had become a symbol of something that resonated with thousands of people who'd experienced similar treatments. Harvard Law School's admissions office reached out to congratulate me and express their excitement about having me join their incoming class. They'd seen the video, they said, and were impressed by my grace under pressure and my commitment to standing up for myself. It was the kind of support and validation I'd been craving from my family my entire life, and it was coming from strangers. 2 weeks after the video was posted, Kimberly called me crying. Not the manipulative tears I'd seen her use to get out of trouble our entire lives, but real, raw sobs that made her words almost incomprehensible. "Maya, I need you to take down the video," she managed to say through her tears. "People at my work have seen it. They're asking me questions about our family. One of my clients canceled a commission because she said she couldn't support someone from such a toxic family dynamic. This is affecting my business." I felt a familiar pang of guilt, the same feeling I'd carried my whole life when Kimberly faced any kind of consequence or disappointment. But this time, I recognized it for what it was, a learned response that had kept me small and accommodating for decades. I'm sorry your business is being affected, I said carefully, but I'm not taking down the video. You're destroying our family for internet fame. No, Kimberly, I'm finally telling the truth about our family, and you don't like how it looks in daylight. I took a deep breath. For 22 years, I've protected everyone else's feelings while mine didn't matter. I've kept quiet about the favoritism, the double standards, the constant message that I wasn't enough. I'm done being silent to keep everyone else comfortable. But people are saying terrible things about Mom and Dad. People are responding to what Mom and Dad actually did and said. I didn't make Mom call me a disappointment at my graduation. I didn't make Dad dismiss my achievements for my entire childhood. I just stopped pretending it was okay. The conversation ended with her hanging up on me, but not before she said something that revealed more than she probably intended. You used to be so much easier to deal with. And there it was. The real issue wasn't that I'd embarrassed the family or violated some code of privacy. The real issue was that I'd stopped being the convenient, low-maintenance daughter who absorbed their neglect without complaint. I'd stopped making their favoritism easy by pretending it didn't hurt. 3 weeks later, I was packing the last of my things for my move to Boston when my mother finally called. My mother's voice was different when she finally called, smaller somehow, less certain than I'd ever heard her. She didn't start with hello or ask how I was doing. She just said, "Maya, we need to talk." I was sitting on my apartment floor, surrounded by boxes labeled for my new life in Cambridge. Law school orientation materials were spread across my coffee table, and I'd been reading through the student handbook when my phone rang. For a moment, I considered not answering, but curiosity won over caution. "I'm listening," I said, though I didn't stop sorting through my documents. "This has gone too far. The video, the comments, everything. Your Aunt Patricia won't speak to me at church anymore. Mrs. Chen from down the street asked me if I was that mother from the internet. Your father's coworkers have seen it. We can't go anywhere without people staring." I waited for an apology, for some acknowledgement of what she'd said to me. Instead, she continued with her list of grievances about how my actions had affected her social standing. "The family is falling apart because of what you did," she said, her voice taking on that familiar edge of blame. "Kimberly is beside herself."
She's lost clients because people think we're some kind of dysfunctional family. We are a dysfunctional family, I said quietly. That's the point you're missing. I didn't create the dysfunction by talking about it. I just stopped hiding it. You made us look like monsters. I recorded what actually happened. If that makes you look like monsters, maybe the problem isn't the recording. There was a long silence on the other end. I could hear her breathing, could picture her sitting in the kitchen where she'd had countless conversations about how to fix me, manage me, make me more compliant. "What do you want from us?" she finally asked, and there was something almost desperate in her voice. It was such a simple question, but it broke something open inside me. What did I want from them? I'd spent so many years trying to earn their approval, their recognition, their love. I'd twisted myself into shapes trying to be worthy of their attention. And now, when I finally had leverage, when I finally had something they wanted from me, I realized the truth. "I want you to see me," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I want you to be proud of me. I want you to care about my life as much as you care about Kimberly's. I want you to acknowledge that you've treated me like I don't matter for my entire life. We do care about you. We're proud of you." "No, you're not. You're embarrassed by me. You're angry that I stopped playing along with the family dynamic that worked for everyone except me." I stood up, pacing the small space between my boxes. "You called me your biggest disappointment at my college graduation, Mom. Think about that. Your daughter just graduated summa cum laude and got into Harvard Law School, and your response was to call her a disappointment? I was just frustrated. You never call, you never visit, you act like you're too good for this family. I act like someone who's tired of being treated like she doesn't belong in this family." The words came out harder than I intended, but they were true. "Do you know that I used to practice conversations with you in my head? I'd rehearse how to tell you about my achievements so that maybe, just maybe, you'd react with pride instead of indifference? Do you know how exhausting it is to love people who act like your love is an inconvenience?" She was crying now. I could hear the tears in her voice when she spoke. "We never meant to make you feel that way." "But you did. And instead of apologizing or trying to understand why I felt compelled to make that video, you're calling to lecture me about how it's affecting you." I sat back down on the floor, suddenly exhausted. Even now, in this conversation, you haven't once asked how I'm doing or congratulated me on Harvard. It's all about how my actions have impacted everyone else. "Congratulations on Harvard," she said quietly, but it felt hollow, like something she was checking off a list rather than genuine pride. "Too late," I said. "It doesn't count when you only say it because I pointed out that you hadn't." We sat in silence for several minutes. I could hear the television in the background at her house, the same evening news program she'd watched every day for as long as I could remember. Normal life continuing in a house where I'd never quite belonged. "If I apologize," she said finally, "will you take down the video?" And there it was, the transactional nature of our relationship laid bare. Not an apology because she understood she'd hurt me, but an apology as currency to get what she wanted. "No," I said, "I won't take it down." "Why not? You've made your point." "Because it's not about making a point anymore. It's about telling the truth. That video is the most honest thing I've ever shared about my life, and I'm not going to hide it to make you more comfortable." I picked up my Harvard acceptance letter from the coffee table, running my fingers over the raised seal. "I'm moving to Boston next week. I'm starting law school. I'm building a life where I matter, where my achievements are celebrated instead of dismissed." "So that's it? You're just going to cut us out of your life?" "I'm not cutting you out. I'm just done chasing your approval. If you want a relationship with me, you'll have to actually want it, not just expect it because we share DNA." She hung up without saying goodbye. The move to Boston was liberating in ways I hadn't expected. I found a small apartment near campus, nothing fancy but entirely mine. I decorated it with my academic awards, photos from my graduation where I looked genuinely happy, books I'd collected over the years. For the first time in my life, I lived in a space that reflected who I actually was rather than who my family thought I should be. Law school orientation was everything I dreamed it would be. I was surrounded by brilliant, driven people who were there because they'd earned it. During the introductory session, they asked us to share something we were proud of. When my turn came, I talked about the nonprofit legal clinic I wanted to establish. Afterward, 3 different classmates approached me with ideas for collaboration. No one dismissed my goals as unrealistic or suggested I aim lower. Professor Williams, who taught constitutional law, had seen my viral video. She mentioned it during office hours, not as gossip, but as a case study in courage. "It takes tremendous strength," she said, "to speak your truth when the people closest to you have been denying it your entire life. That's exactly the kind of backbone you'll need as a lawyer." 6 months into my first year, I got an unexpected text from Kimberly. It wasn't an apology or a request for me to take down the video. It was a simple message. "Saw your interview in the Harvard Law Review. Mom showed it to everyone at the grocery store today." I had to read it twice to understand what she was telling me. My mother, who had been so ashamed of my viral video, was now bragging about my law school achievements to strangers at the grocery store. It was typical behavior, really. Now that my success was undeniable and reflected well on her as a parent, she was claiming credit for it. But something had shifted in me during those months in Boston. The validation I'd once craved from my family felt less important now. I had professors who respected my intellect, classmates who valued my opinions, and a future that I was building entirely on my own terms. Their approval had become nice to have rather than essential to my sense of self-worth. I texted Kimberly back, "That's nice. How are you doing?" We started texting occasionally after that, small conversations about safe topics like the weather and her design work. She never mentioned our parents' reaction to the video again, and I never asked. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was a tentative step towards something that might eventually become a healthier relationship. A year later, I was studying for finals when my father called. It was the first time I'd heard his voice since graduation day. He sounded older, more uncertain than I remembered. "Your mother wants to know if you're coming home for Christmas," he said. "Are you inviting me, or are you just delivering a message?" He was quiet for a moment. "I'm inviting you. We both are. We miss you." "I'll think about it," I said, and I meant it.
Not because I was desperate for their approval anymore, but because I was curious to see how we'd interact now that I'd stopped trying to earn their love. I ended up going home for Christmas Eve dinner. It was awkward at first, everyone carefully avoiding anything that might lead to conflict. But something interesting happened during dessert. My mother asked about my classes, and when I told her about a case I was working on for the immigration clinic, she listened. Really listened, asked follow-up questions, seemed genuinely interested in the work I was doing. It wasn't a complete transformation. She still lit up more when Kimberly talked about her latest design projects, but for the first time in my life, I felt like she saw me as a person with my own interesting life, rather than just a reflection of her parenting success or failure. As I drove back to Boston that night, I realized something had fundamentally changed. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't carrying the weight of their expectations or the burden of their disappointment. I'd built a life where I was valued for who I actually was, and their opinion of me had become just one voice among many, rather than the defining narrative of my self-worth. The video is still online. It has over 2 million views now, and the comments section has become a support group for people with similar family experiences. I get messages regularly from young people who say it gave them courage to stand up for themselves, to pursue their dreams despite family opposition, to stop accepting crumbs of affection from people who should love them unconditionally. Sometimes I wonder if I should have handled things differently, been more diplomatic, found a way to address the problem without making it public. But then I remember that 22 years of diplomacy and accommodation had gotten me nowhere. Sometimes the only way to change a dynamic is to stop participating in it entirely. I graduate from Harvard Law School next month. I've already accepted a position with a civil rights firm in Washington, D.C., and I'm planning to open that nonprofit legal clinic within the next 5 years. My parents are coming to graduation, and they seem genuinely proud, though I suspect it has more to do with the prestige of Harvard than with any real understanding of what I've accomplished. But that's okay. I don't need them to understand. I don't need their validation to know that I've built something beautiful out of the pain they caused. I don't need their approval to know that I'm exactly who I was meant to be. The girl who was called a disappointment at her college graduation is about to graduate from Harvard Law School with highest honors, and the only person whose opinion of that accomplishment really matters is mine. 3 years have passed since that graduation day video changed everything. I'm sitting in my office at the Rodriguez Legal Clinic, the nonprofit I founded in downtown D.C. The nameplate on my door reads Maya Rodriguez, JD, Executive Director, and I still get a little thrill every time I see it. Last week, my mother called to tell me that Mrs. Chen, the neighbor who once asked if she was that mother from the internet, stopped her at the grocery store again. This time, Mrs. Chen wanted to know if I was the same Maya Rodriguez who'd been featured in the Washington Post for my work with undocumented families. I told her you were my daughter, my mother said, and I could hear the pride in her voice. I showed her the article on my phone. It's strange how time changes perspectives. The woman who once called me her biggest disappointment now carries newspaper clippings about my legal victories in her purse. The family who treated my achievements as afterthoughts now mentions my work to anyone who listen. They've rewritten our history in their minds, turned themselves into supportive parents who always believed in me. I don't correct them anymore. I don't need to. Yesterday, a young woman named Sophia came to my clinic. She'd seen my original viral video years ago and said it inspired her to go back to school despite her family's disapproval. Now she's a social worker, and she was referring a client to us. You taught me that sometimes you have to disappoint the people you love to become who you're meant to be, she told me. That's when I understood why I'd never taken down the video, despite all the family pressure. It was never really about them. It was about every person who's ever been told they're not enough, who's ever had their dreams dismissed, who's ever been made to feel like their pain doesn't matter. Kimberly visits me sometimes when she's in D.C. for work. Our relationship isn't what it was, but it's honest now. She apologized, eventually, for all the ways she'd benefited from the family dynamic without questioning it. We'll never be best friends, but we're learning to be sisters in a way that doesn't require me to disappear. My parents still favor her, probably always will, but it doesn't hurt anymore because I've built a life where I'm surrounded by people who see my worth clearly. Their opinion is just one voice among many, and it's no longer the loudest. The video has over 5 million views now. Sometimes I get recognized on the street, usually by young people who tell me it helped them find their voice. I've spoken at colleges about family dynamics and personal advocacy. I've been interviewed by podcasts and magazines. The girl who was overlooked her entire childhood has somehow become someone others look up to. But the real victory isn't the recognition or the success. It's the peace I feel every morning when I wake up in a life I built entirely for myself. It's knowing that I matter because I say I matter, not because someone else finally agrees. The disappointment became the dream, and that's a story worth telling. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.